Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, especially to our friends tuning in from India. My name is Nikos Tsafos, and I'm the James Schlesinger Chair for Energy and Geopolitics here at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And I'm just so thrilled to welcome you today to a conversation on the clean energy relationship between the United States and India. When I think about the work that we need to do to advance the energy transition over the next 30 years, there are very few bilateral relationships that are just as important as the US-India relationship. And when I think of the work that we have done here at CSIS, both in the Energy Security and Climate Change Program, but also with our colleagues at the Wadlani Chair and around the center, I'm so proud of the work that we have done to advance the cause and play a small part in helping strengthen that bilateral relationship. We have a little bit of a scheduling issue. Our colleagues and our guests from India, the Secretary and the Joint Secretary, have been tied up in a meeting. We're hoping they can join us, but we had a presentation slated anyway, so we thought we would get started. In terms of logistics, I asked that you by now know how to use the functions to send your questions to us, and we will be looking at those as we go along. And so with that, I'm going to pass it to my former colleague, Kartikeya Singh, who's also the Director of Programs with the said fund, to kick us off in this conversation.
Thank you, Nikos. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone here from The Hague in the Netherlands. I'm Kartikeya Singh, and I'm wearing a couple of different hats today. I am now a non-resident senior associate at CSIS and also director of programs at the said fund. The said fund supports the best of government efforts and civil society to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, including supporting a just clean energy transition. And I am honored to be having this conversation with representatives from the United States government to start with, and hopefully representatives from India. But Dr. Andrew Light is somebody that I have known for quite some time, so this should be a good conversation, a relaxed conversation to have. Let me just take a moment, of course, to wish a happy Ganesh Chaturthi to everybody in India and around the world that are celebrating. It's an important holiday in India, celebrating a most iconic Hindu deity, and I think the fact that Lord Ganesh is the god of beginnings and remover of obstacles is particularly auspicious for us as we talk about a revamped strategic clean energy partnership between the United States and India. Let me, of course, provide a little bit of context on US-India energy ties, because the issue is one of the key pillars that defines US-India relations more broadly. And it has a long arc that, if one were to reflect on it, it can be tracked where we were in moments in time in terms of dominance of certain energy technologies, of the availability of finance, and how those have changed over time. And in the arc of US-India energy collaboration in particular, I think some key moments that can be remembered are, of course, the Indo-US Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement, which was a major breakthrough in bolstering bilateral energy ties more broadly, but also things like the Greenhouse Gas Prevention Program that was meant to aid in managing air quality issues from thermal power plants, as well as making them more efficient. People know that there was also a shot in the arm given to fossil gas collaboration between the United States and India over the last few years. And while renewable energy has been always an area of collaboration, I think, between the two countries when it comes to energy, it has gained new prominence and new strategic importance, particularly as the business models, the availability of finance, and just the innovations in clean energy technologies has improved in the last 5 to 7 years. Now, a couple of things are going to happen today. Of course, I want to hear and have a conversation with Dr. Light about what's happening in this revamped US-India Strategic Clean Energy Partnership. But to aid in that effort, I want to also highlight a report that was launched as part of a project that Ernst & Young and the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry collaborated on to basically compile a list of shovel-ready green infrastructure projects that can be invested in right now and can be the focus of such bilateral energy partnerships as many countries around the world, including, of course, the United States, try to focus on helping India meet its ambitious clean energy targets. And to aid in that and to share some of the highlights of this report, I'm going to call upon Mr. Somesh Kumar, who is a partner at EY India, to talk us through that, and then we'll have a conversation with Dr. Light.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karthik, and very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody around. It's a great privilege here for me to be actually speaking to all of you, the senior representatives from US Energy Department, CIS, CSIS, and SED senior folks. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We indeed had this honor to work with SED on developing a report on a clean energy status in India and what is happening. Looking at some of the shovel-ready projects for investments in India and what is the status and what's holding them back. For doing this, we work closely with the ministry and various associated departments in the ministry, and we also work with several players in the private sector to understand where they are and what is going on. So, happy to share these findings with you today. And, before that, I would really like to highlight that, there is a lot of scope and, a lot of opportunity for a strategic partnership between US and India in all of these areas, so whether it is grid scale renewable energy projects, or whether it is distributed renewable energy projects, or whether it is manufacturing of batteries or energy storage. So all of these areas are now open. India has a huge target to accomplish, and which it has set for itself. A significant opportunity for US-India partnership that we see. So in the next few minutes, briefly, I will summarize the findings. As Karthikeya said, we looked at some shovel-ready projects. So these were about 660 projects that we looked at in the complete life cycle, where they are and what is happening. We also looked at what is at stake, by development of these projects, or by not development of these projects, what do we tend to lose? And in the post-COVID period, how can they aid in economic recovery? And these covered projects across renewable power generation, energy storage, EV charging infrastructure, and manufacturing original R equipment. So these were the subsectors that we covered for this study. Yeah, can we move on? Yeah, so, highlighting briefly what is at stake. So, of course, these are 660 projects that we looked at. So these collectively aggregate to more than 120 gigawatts of renewable energy coming in, and a large number of EV charging stations. This involves a capital outlay of almost 82 billion USD, and also offers an employment potential for the country of about 1.5 million. So, these are huge numbers for India, and, likewise, it sort of opens up the opportunities for US to partner with India in furthering most of these projects. So, again, just highlights the significance of the opportunity that this presents. So, yeah. Can we move on, please? Yeah. So, two key trends that we are seeing in India, and, which is a significant departure from what we were seeing earlier in the last 10 to 15 years, was the focus was more on plain vanilla solar, wind kind of projects. But now what we are seeing is, there is a gradual transition towards hybrid projects. So we are seeing more and more options coming in for some sort of blended solar, wind, biomass with storage kind of projects, and even in some cases, stranded thermal power generation assets. So more and more of hybrid assets being seen coming in now, both promoted by government as well as the private sector coming in on its own. And also we are seeing more demand for round-the-clock supply of RE power. So it's not just supply during the day, but setting up a significantly larger capacity along with storage to help the distribution companies manage the intermittency of power during this period. So these are two very clear trends that we are seeing in the Indian market now. Yeah, can we move on, please? Yeah, so of the projects that we looked at, and this is just 660 projects that we looked at, there are many more in the system, but these are quite representative of the whole system. So what this highlighted was that of the projects that are conceived, 23% have just been announced, and no further action has been taken. And very surprisingly, 68%, which represents the major chunk of the projects, is still under some sort of approval or permitting stage. Either it is the PPAs are under approval, or the project itself or the tariff discovered is undergoing a regulatory approval process. So the projects even for the last 1 year have not seen significant movement towards construction or completion after being announced, and just about 9 to 10% has actually reached the stage of construction. So this represents or reflects a clear fact that the projects take a lot of time to develop even after being announced due to a host of factors which are present in the Indian system. So clear areas where government can actually provide impetus to benefit the economy as a whole, and also achieve its targets of 450 megawatts or gigawatts that it has set for itself. So a huge opportunity here, but the projects are move slowly and not as fast as we would want them to move. So that's the kind of impression that we got. Yes, please move on. Yeah, let's move on. This was not needed. Yeah, so looking at the grid scale projects that we saw, there are a few distinct areas where we think there is clear opportunity for US to assist India and partnership with India. So one or two areas clearly are around helping India promote electrification of most of the fuels that we have. So right now, the fuels are still dependent, or chief fuels are still diesel or some sort of hybrid of gas, etc. But we want to move towards electrification more and more, and for this, some sort of R&D support is needed in India. So US can really support with some sort of technical assistance and some sort of studies and demonstration of some of the technologies that are tested and used in US and which can be actually deployed in India at a mass scale. So that is very much needed, and beginning from that, we can also look at helping India develop more bankable projects, which are round-the-clock projects, larger projects, also hybrid projects, and also supporting it with financing. So financing is an important element, and we know that all these projects will require significant financing. Almost 86 billion, as we saw in the previous slide. So there is a need for capital to come in, and I think US can really support with that. Also, some of the demonstration projects for the newer technologies or more emerging technologies around green hydrogen, etc. India is very keenly looking at this, but the work done so far is limited. So again, US-India partnership can actually really look at managing intermittency of renewable power generation with green hydrogen production, through electrolysis process. So any demonstration projects which are available, which can further deployment of these in India. So significant opportunities here. Just a few I've highlighted here, but there's ample opportunity, or the space is vacant as of now. Yes, please move on. The other area, this is the second area apart from grid connected renewable energy projects, is the distributed renewable energy projects. So there is a significant interest and impetus of the government, almost to the tune of 40 to 45 gigawatts in distributed solar. Almost 18 to 20 gigawatts has already been announced. Rest is under, sort of contemplation right now. And it is happening through various models, capital investment, capex model is one. RESCO model is another one, where the demand is aggregated and not, the utility, or there are RESCOs which sort of take the risk of aggregating demand and running this. So both the models under consideration. But again, there is a huge scope for proliferation of distributed renewable energy generation projects. We haven't sort of installed more than 6 gigawatt as of now. So going forward, a significant opportunity still remains, and the time frame set for this is also very ambitious by the Indian government. So we, any support or in terms of US-India Clean Energy Partnership will be very welcome. So again, please move on. Here, clearly some areas which are of focus is rooftop solar deployment in huge rural areas and health centers. These are huge sort of areas where rooftop deployment can be accelerated. So some sort of aggregation and technical assistance for that is possible. Also, now the responsibility for promoting rooftop is with the distribution companies in India. And the distribution companies have not been traditionally financially very strong. They require financing, they require technical support. So all those support areas could be provided by US under this partnership. Also, we can look at promoting contactless digital platforms for reducing transaction costs and enhancing consumer experience of doing solar. To some extent, this has happened in India, but there is a huge need for greater technological platforms which reduce manual dependence on the work that is done in India towards approvals, towards getting applications, etc. So again, significant technological inputs are possible in this area. The third theme that is available in India is under a PM. It's directly with the Prime Minister's office, and it's called as Kusum scheme, which is actually solarization of agriculture sector, basically working with the farmers and solarizing most of the farm supplies of power. So again, this is a significant area of focus for the government, and almost all the Indian states are trying to accelerate this. Again, the models available are both under CapEx and OpEx. Farmers typically do not have enough financing available to invest in this kind of setup. So some sort of aggregation needs to be done to actually launch some kind of line of credit to farmers which are friendly and which can be taken up and which can forward the sectors. Almost about 10 gigawatts of capacity is planned under this. So this needs to be furthered. Only the capacity that has been sort of implemented till now is very, very limited under this. So huge need for acceleration of this. Yeah, please move on. So here as well, we can look at developing more bankable projects for optimizing cost under the agro PV projects model, and also some sort of dedicated financing or credit guarantee facilities on agri infrastructure fund to enable farmers to access debt at low cost, and also setting up decentralized renewable energy projects on capex mode. So this is something which has not happened till now. But there is a huge need for it going forward. Yes, this brings me to the last theme that we have. So again, this is around solar PV cell module or lithium-ion battery manufacturing. India has not been the front runner in sort of manufacturing cells or modules within the country. and probably, we already lost out on this opportunity, but now the opportunity is there for lithium-ion battery manufacturing in India. But again, there is significant investment need for this. Government has already launched a scheme called production-linked incentive, where it is providing some sort of incentive for manufacturing of these high technology batteries. But that is the amount that is set aside for that is very limited. The investment is still huge that is needed. Going forward, again, significant contribution is possible under the US partnership, US-India partnership. Please move on. Just a few areas where this is clearly eminent is in terms of research and development and demonstration of high efficiency PV modules and ACC battery solutions, as well as looking at creating alternative supply chains for critical equipment and minerals, supporting energy transition in terms of, say for instance, production of polysilicon wafers, which India doesn't do at all as of now. But this is something which needs to be done again, or production of high efficiency electrolyzers for green hydrogen. This is a really upcoming area where a lot of discussion is happening, but there is no clear pathway on how to move on this. And also, some sort of chemical refining of raw material ores to produce industry grade metals for producing lithium or nickel or rare earths. So this is a really cutting edge technology area where we've hardly seen any investment coming in, or even a buy-in towards a particular technology. So this is a clear area of very high-end partnership between US and India. Yes, please move on. This is my last slide. So we did this study about 6 months back, and now we are going to further refine this. We're going to cover some more sectors in detail which were not covered earlier, and also expand this to about 1,000 projects. We're going to look at what is the status, where have they moved, where is the need for additional push, and also where can more international partnerships be opened up, what are those areas. So this is something which is next in line, and hopefully we will be completing this work in another 3 to 4 months. And come back with another analysis on this. So thank you so much once again for giving us this opportunity to present. Happy to have any questions later on, Karthikeya, as you feel appropriate.
Thanks, Samesh. I think you've already started to get some questions in the chat that you might be able to respond to directly. I noticed that there were some questions about things that had been left out and what have you, but I think there's explanations for that. So as I mentioned before, the purpose of this effort was really to package up what are the shovel-ready investment green infrastructure projects. And certainly within the context of this particular bilateral energy partnership, clean energy is a key focus area. So the hope is that this particular tool can be one used by investors and those providing technical assistance and governments to be able to draw upon to further the aims of this particular partnership. But now let me invite Dr. Andrew Light, Assistant Secretary for DOE's International Affairs, to give us a little snapshot of what has just happened in terms of the revamped US-India Strategic Clean Energy Partnership, and also any reactions you may have to this report.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. We had a really great launch of the new Strategic Clean Energy Dialogue yesterday that was co-chaired by Secretary Granholm and Minister Puri. And I think if just to give you a quick overview, though, people should go to the DOE website. We have posted the joint statement so far for the dialogue that was held yesterday. And so you can look at some of the details there. I'll just kind of briefly go over a couple items here. But to give a little history on this, I mean, the United States and India have long had some kind of energy dialogue or some kind of partnership there. I mean, going back many administrations, Republican and Democrat, it's really been a source of really inspiring bipartisan consensus on the need to cooperate with India in this particularly important area. And it's long been the case that we've focused on energy security and energy innovation, and across every administration, some degree, dial up, dial down, depend on how you look at it and the degree of effort, but on clean energy. So that's kind of always been a mainstay, including especially if you look at, when Prime Minister Modi was elected in the spring of 2014, one of the first things he did was he took his 20 gigawatt solar target that the Congress Party had, and then increased it, right, multiplied it to 100 gigawatts right off the bat, and that wasn't in response to what we knew was sort of the emerging architecture of the Paris Agreement, and what we've been thinking. I was on the climate team at the State Department at the time. What we're thinking about in terms of the architecture of nationally determined contributions. This was just unilaterally done, and then within, I don't know what it was, like 6, 7, 8 months, right, increased that to 175 gigawatts, right by 2022, including wind, including small hydro, biomass and others. And so really, like right off the bat, the commitment of the Prime Minister was very strong on this issue. So there was always something for us to work with there in the Obama administration, and going through the Trump administration as well. By then, like the Prime Minister had increased his targets to 450 gigawatts by 2030. Again, completely outside of the architecture of Paris. And this kind of independence and incredibly bold thinking was something that all administrations have been able to respond to in some degree or another. Now, it is absolutely the case that what we're doing now is the strategic, what's called the Strategic Energy Dialogue. Secretary Granholm and I were able to negotiate very successfully with our counterparts at the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, and of the 5 Indian energy ministries, the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas is the lead ministry among the others, right? For this, right now, it's changed over time. It used to be the Power Ministry when I was last in office in the Obama administration, and now it's Petroleum and Natural Gas, which has the lead, but all the 5 energy ministries, as well as NITI Aayog and other the Department of Science and Technology, cooperate with India on, or cooperate as part of our energy dialogue. But right off the bat, Secretary Granholm then asked Minister Pradhan, who was in charge of petroleum and natural gas at the time, until the recent cabinet reorganization, can we actually not only go into the guts of this and kind of think about, like, well, what are we going to be doing from now on something like oil and gas? What are we going to be doing in those kind of areas? Can we change even the name of it from Strategic Energy Dialogue to Strategic Clean Energy Dialogue? And he said, yes, absolutely. And he was completely on board with this. And then, as you know, in July, there was a shuffle in the cabinet, and Minister Puri came in. And Secretary Granholm and Minister Puri had actually not spoken together until day before yesterday, until the day before we actually convened the new Strategic Clean Energy Dialogue. And we had high hopes that there would be a continuation of exactly the kind of the relationship that the Secretary had with Minister Pradhan, and we were so thrilled with their initial interaction. Very strong, just like, yes, absolutely, the future here is on clean energy. That's what we need to do. On things like oil and gas, we're going to focus on methane abatement as a very important area that we can, which will be a cost-saving issue for the Indian government. And there's a straight continuation, and that was carried through yesterday with we launched the SC&ED. And so there's 5 pillars of the Strategic Clean Energy Dialogue: power and energy efficiency, which will focus mostly on modernizing and strengthening the electricity grid, addressing demand growth, a greater focus on energy efficiency and conservation, super efficient appliances, efficient buildings, industrial sectors, just the kind of stuff that you were doing, Karte, when you were, in these buildings as well. Renewable energy, we're going to continue to support India's development, obviously, of the big 450 gigawatt target, and that's going to be, talk about it later if you'd like, the real, because what we did, the new Agenda 2030 partnership between India and the United States on climate and energy was launched at President Biden's April Climate Summit, and it's got 2 big parts of it: the energy part, which Secretary Granholm now convenes with her main counterpart, her appointed counterpart, Minister Puri, but of course working with the other ministers. And then there's the climate and finance part, which is convened by Secretary Kerry and the Minister of the Environment. So two big parter. And both of those parts will be working on trying to achieve this 450 gigawatt target, which is just massive and is so critical, not only to the future of India, but the future of the world. I mean, if India does not achieve its 450 gigawatt target, and we look at projections where we're going, it makes it hard to conceive of how we will achieve our long-term targets under the Paris Agreement in terms of temperature stabilization. So this is an essential and very high priority for this government, given our belief that we're facing an existential crisis right now, with harm right now that needs to be addressed. A third pillar is on, it's been retermed responsible oil and gas, which will focus on reducing consumption of high polluting fuels and, as I said before, methane abatement. Fourth pillar on sustainable growth, which is between NITI Aayog and USAID, continuing work that they've been doing, again, for over a decade on low carbon pathways through energy, data, and management, development of low carbon technologies and just transition in the coal sector. And then finally, emerging fuels, which is a new pillar we're so excited about. And this was a very high priority of Minister Puri, to focus on bioenergy, hydrogen, waste to energy, and facilitate decarbonization in hard to abate sectors. And so that's where we're going to have part of our conversation with industrial decarbonization, which is a gigantic future for India. The other thing that we talked about yesterday, which is not formally part of the SCNED, but is part of the sort of the family there, is of course our signature PACE-R, Partnership to Advance Clean Energy Research, which is, we contribute money to US institutions, India contributes an equal amount of money to Indian institutions to collaborate on R&D. We've had amazing work with them in the past on solar, on building efficiency, and we're really going to focus there on a lot of new areas, including on CCS, joint research on CCS, which is extremely exciting. And then also finally, had a report out on our nuclear working group there. And so, which is again, not formally part of the SCNED, but again, reports into it. And so we all kind of know where that will go with respect to the future of the energy mix. So very exciting. And that's in a nutshell what we launched yesterday. And on Monday, Secretary Kerry will do the formal launch of his half, right, of the overall 2030 partnership, which is the Climate Action and Finance Mobilization Track, or CAFM. Doesn't have an acronym that really rolls off the tongue. So we can say SCED, CAFM, I guess. And so Secretary Kerry will be meeting there and formally launching that on the 13th in Delhi. Deputy Secretary of Energy Dave Turk will also be on that meeting, which we're very excited, which again signals just this is a unified effort, right? It is climate and energy together, which is exactly the formulation that we had when we were in government in the Obama administration, and it's great to see a resumption of that unified whole.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really interesting. I'm glad you flagged Secretary Kerry's upcoming visit. Let me just take a step back and also say, the gargantuan target that the government of India has, 450 gigawatts of renewable energy, is quite important. It's staggering in its amount. And I would say that having this mandate almost propels arguably India's Ministry of New and Renewable Energy to become one of the most important and significant government agencies in the world, not just for India, but for the rest of the world in trying to help achieve that target. Now, there is this getting renewable energy out and deployed element of this partnership. And then there's also this finance bit that you touched on that will be launched on Monday. Can you, how do you envision the climate action and finance mobilization track, as well as the SCEP working together under this Agenda 2030 partnership?
So I think the glue that holds these two things together is the 450 gigawatt target. I think that I think that's it, because it's like that clearly overlaps, especially when you've got the finance part of the track happening with the climate mobilization track. And we've had these pieces before, right? We had when I was in the Obama administration, I was the U.S. director of the Joint Working Group for Combating Climate Change. That was the climate part. And then we had the Energy Dialogue, which was run out of this office that I'm sitting in now, which which I didn't expect I would someday be.
Familiar.
But you know, so you know, David Sandilow and John Elkind then were sort of overseeing that process, and of course led by, you know, Secretaries Chu first and then Secretary Moniz. And then there was, you know, finance discussions, which were a lot of it driven out of State Energy Bureau, in fact, and that was sort of floating kind of somewhere in between. So it's really kind of harmonized this. So we've got the Strategic Clean Energy Dialogue and the Climate Action and Finance Mobilization track, right? But to get to 450, you got to merge these things together, especially the energy and the finance parts. And it's everything from R&D to deployment, right? And attracting the investment to make it possible. And you look at sort of, so India's about 100 gigawatts now of renewables, which is fantastic. And I don't know, can't speak for you, but like when I first heard in 2014 that that Modi was taking just the solar target to 100 gigs, right, by 2022, I was like, well, 100's a nice round number, you know. I mean, like, that sounds like a kind of a target setting exercise that you would do in any government around the world. 100, you know, and like not 98.5, but 100. You know, and some of us were quite skeptical, but you know, it's not going to be all 100 of solar, but all in, yeah, they're going to get there, and that's fine. And especially if you look at where India was in 2014, this is an amazing amount of progress. But to get to 450 by 2030, right, you're talking about around 40 gigs a year that have to be onboarded between now and then. That's 5 times faster than what we've seen so far, which has been extraordinary. And we estimate that's $500 billion, more or less, right, of investment that needs to go into India in order to make that happen. So there is no universe where these two things, the agenda is not really one whole. The Agenda 2030 partnership is not one whole that works together. And the thing that sort of really where we are most excited is it's not just achieving those targets on the electricity side, the energy side. It is also the expansion and the capacity that you see in India for something I mentioned before, large-scale demonstration projects for industrial decarbonization. So that's one of the things that we, in our documents, going back to if you go back and look at the stuff that we released in April at the climate summit, one of the things we talk about there is large-scale industrial decarbonization pilot projects in decarbonized steel using hydrogen, CCS. You mean this is the thing, the problems we're going to be working through. And I think this is something India can take on. Part of that will meet the definition of sort of onboarding power for the existing 2030 target, but part of it will be potentially allowing the Indian government, if they choose, to take on, to again lead the world with similarly ambitious industrial decarb targets. And think about it. I mean, if India becomes, let's say, it's a scenario, because I'm not making policy without my colleagues from the Indian government here, right? But for example, hypothetically, let's say we could imagine large-scale demonstration projects in green steel production using green hydrogen, right? Or, you know, hydrogen from gas with CCS or something like that. And that's steel. And then you kind of imagine, right, how the world changes if India becomes the hub of production of green decarbonized steel, which meets a global demand, which is generated by the climate targets and the net zero targets of all the, just take the developed countries without even getting into the big developing countries. Developed countries are all of one voice now. We're all committed to net zero by 2050. We're going to have to decarbonize our hard to abate sectors. We're going to have to supply, right, those hard to abate sectors. If India becomes a hub for that, and for example, they're purchasing green hydrogen from the United States, where we're committed to producing $1 per kilo of hydrogen by 2030, right? That's the earth shot that's being done in this building right now on hydrogen. We do that. Imagine that supply chain that is created, and imagine how that just transforms the economy. Now, to make demonstration projects like that, which are so big, you're actually just calling them demonstration, like, is a little weird to me, because I think they're actually, it just becomes the industry at some point, you know. That, right, is something you have to marry what Secretary Kerry's process is and Secretary Granholm's process is and put them together. That can't be done by one half alone.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The Prime Minister also announced in the Independence Day speech this year that India will become a green hydrogen hub, and there was a whole portal launched, a hydrogen portal for India. And even the Earthshot efforts of DOE could be, in parallel looked at by the announcement of Mr. Ambani of Reliance, who also would like to get the per kilogram cost of green hydrogen down to some very low amounts. So I think there's certainly a scope for a lot of industry collaboration, and I'm glad to see that the Partnership to Advance Clean Energy Research is still happening, and that there is a new hydrogen task force that is a part of this bilateral energy collaboration. A couple of things jumped out to me, and so I have two remaining questions for you that I think are really important. One is, if we're dealing with engagement with India, and particularly India's sort of who controls the flow of electrons. The central government matters in terms of managing and setting bold, beautiful visions, but state governments are incredibly important in delivery on that. And I know the United States and many countries in their bilateral energy partnerships with India have some state level engagement. Now, I think a month or so ago, we had the first sort of formalized platform for state to state collaboration on clean energy between the United States and India by the MOU signing that Secretary Granholm and Minister Kuba were at between the National Association of State Energy Officials in the US and the Association of Renewable Energy Agencies of States. Which is great. I'm just curious as to how can states, what can they sort of do to feed into this process? And what scope do you see for US states? In which US states could possibly be brought into this conversation as potential partners as part of the US toolkit to engage with India's energy transition, if I might ask that?
Yeah, well, look, I was there with the secretary when she was witnessing that signing between NASIO and RES, and it's fantastic to see that happen. Also present, I should say, were Minister Kuba and Secretary Chaturvedi were there as well, and no one more than my boss, Secretary Granholm, better appreciates the critical role, right, of the states can play in this as a former governor of Michigan, and so she was actually thrilled to see that signing and to see that work go through. And I have to say, the one of the things that was really very heartening to see over the last 4 years in the United States was the strengthening of the coordination of state and city and regional action on energy and climate change of necessity, right? And it was great. We saw the launch of the U.S. Climate Alliance and the expansion of the mayor's kind of process, and on and on and on. And we are still in. Right campaign and everything is really great. So that's better and more coordinated than it's ever been in the United States. We cannot let that fall off the table now and the federal government just step in and say, oh, we're going to handle it now. That would be ridiculous. And so what we actually have to do, and the United States can't meet its domestic targets, let alone what we'd like to do with other countries, unless we've got the states moving with us, right? As these engines of creativity and these engines, right, of ambition. And so we know, right, California, for example, is big enough and strong enough and has enough going on there that they've had a very good track record of international collaboration. And in fact, I'm very happy that one of my former bosses, Kate Gordon, who used to run climate action for the governor of California, is now a senior advisor here in the Department of Energy for Secretary Granholm, mostly working on our jobs portfolio. And the extraordinary thing there is that I think that we are kind of going to see in the United States a much tighter, continuation of that thrust. And now we got to find other states we can help them develop the similar capacity. It's hard. It's hard to sort of carve out time in a governor's schedule or the staff schedule or resources, right, in states to do this kind of work. And that's where things like the NASIO RES collaboration is going to work really well. And I think the same thing is true in India. I mean, we know that it is that the Indian states are often like the leaders of this. I mean, Prime Minister Modi himself, right, was leading the way in Gujarat well before he was prime minister for creating the first Indian state Department of Climate Change. Was a leader in solar, a leader in climate adaptation, the agricultural areas, especially with respect to water tables. It goes again and again. So there's just this wealth of knowledge. What we need to do now between Delhi and Washington, frankly, is to figure out how to empower, right, subnational actors or non-federal actors, but at the same time, get out of the way.
Yeah.
How is it that we unintentionally, primarily, throw up roadblocks for them to get together and actually work together? We have to all know what each other is doing, but I just think that's one of the things there. And one of the last things that I did at the World Resources Institute before I took this job, I was working on the research program for the U.S.-India Track 2 dialogue, which I helped to start over a decade ago at the Center for American Progress with John Podesta, and we were in fact started to work on that problem. How do you streamline and make these things possible? And I think we can do it.
Yeah, well, and then again, the last question I really have is, again, relates a little bit to states, but to what I saw in this joint statement that was quite eye-popping and exciting, which is, there's a lot of talk and pressure on India to declare a net zero target. I don't know if it'll happen. I'm not going to try and presume that it may, but there are certainly Indian states that are kind of leading the charge in terms of driving a decarbonization agenda just because of the success of renewables, including, states like Gujarat and Chhattisgarh and Karnataka and Maharashtra, all sort of announcing no new thermal power plants because of just where we are in terms of coal versus renewables. And all of that sort of throws up some really interesting questions on the just transition.
Yeah.
I was quite surprised and pleasantly so to see in the joint statement that one of the areas for collaboration is ensuring a just energy transition and, identify opportunities for job creation and skills building for both countries, particularly for communities most impacted, to ensure that the transition is just. Now, so what does that look like? I mean, this is, it's exciting to see. I think there are probably eyes and ears in both countries that are interested in this. What kinds of parties and partners can be part of this kind of effort?
Well, let me say something. It's a great question. Let me say something at the top, which highlights the importance of this issue, because why is it that we're seeing so much activity and so much enthusiasm, whether it's part of the COP process or not, of enhancing ambition, right, and around the world? It's because of the climate crisis. It's being driven by the employment opportunity. I mean, there are millions and millions and millions of jobs that can be created just out of the US-India part of our cooperation, let alone the rest of the world. The International Finance Corporation estimated, you just take the top dozen or so targets of developing countries originally from Paris from 2015, and if those dozen countries do what they say they're going to do by 2030, it's a $23 trillion investment opportunity in the world. India is going to be a absolute focus of this investment opportunity. That drives the capital markets. That gets investors over whatever anxieties they might have of new markets and renewable energy and stuff like that. It drives internal reform, and it gets us more money in, which produces jobs. But those jobs, we need to see a transition, because as we dial up jobs in renewable energy and we change our energy mix, we want to absolutely invest in carbon capture and sequestration, so we can continue to produce electrons from cleaner sources of burning of fossil fuels. But at the same time, we know that these things are going to change. So in the United States, we have the American Jobs and Energy Manufacturing Act of 2021, which is going to be deploying billions of dollars, right, to sort of support communities in transition. And the fact of the matter is that if we look around the world of countries where we can learn something and we're in the same boat with just transition, it's not Europe. It's not Western Europe, at least, where they're further ahead in this process than we are. It is countries like India. It's the countries of Eastern Europe. It's the countries which are, kind of more like just getting into the transition and jobs there. And so what we need to do is to learn from each. This is a place where India and the United States can absolutely learn from each other and go through the transition at the same time, and share the resources of knowledge on that. We have a tradition in both countries of empowering labor communities, and we need to accelerate that and strengthen it, so that when we take advantage of this enormous job creating opportunity, we do it in such a way that no community is left behind. And I think that's a commitment of the Indian government. It's a commitment of the United States government. It's something that the two leaders completely agree upon. If you look at Prime Minister Modi's comments, he was the third main speaker at President Biden's April summit. It's all about the opportunity, and it's all about doing it in a way that does lift the tide of all people. And so that's things where, for example, dialogues between Coal India Limited and US counterparts have to be facilitated, where we are getting, again, the labor communities together, where they can learn from each other. And everything from how do you engage with this issue to retraining, skills, how do you maintain the social safety net for retiring workers in these areas. It's a full agenda, but it's an incredibly exciting one.
Yeah, listen, this topic, I think, throws open the opportunity to get so many different kinds of new stakeholders engaged. We're talking about Department of Labor, potentially, and folks that really design skilling and training programs, and thinking through transition of entire communities. And what is really exciting, as you said, is that, this is happening in real time, and it's happening in real time in so many parts of the world. That it's a two-way street. There's a lot to learn from each other. And I think with India, frankly, there's a lot of two-way streets just because it's such an exciting electricity market that's discovering incredible new lows in terms of tariffs of renewable energy pricing and how projects are structured, and also a key partner on the joint R&D side of things. So clearly the partnership continues to evolve to match and meet this sort of energy transition moment. I'm mindful of the time, and I know that you had a hard stop. So I want to take a moment to thank you for making the time to explain to us, what's happening in the Strategic Clean Energy Partnership that was launched. Certainly wish you all success, and we'll continue to root for this bilateral partnership. And we'll find another time to engage with our colleagues from the Government of India, who I understand have been sort of quietly busy with a meeting with the minister. So that is why they were not able to participate today. But clearly, you've had a very successful launch of the SCEP, and the dialogue is continuing, including next week. With
exactly, it's in real time. It's in real time. Can I briefly say thank you so much for bringing here, and that was an absolutely fabulous report. And I can't wait to dig into it because it is a guidepost for what we want to do. And I want to thank Nikos and the whole team at CSIS, who are such great partners on the India work, on the just transition work. We did a fantastic side event at the April Summit with CSIS, and we just look forward to working with you guys. You have an incredible team there, and I know we're gonna see great things moving forward.
Thanks, Andrew. Nikos, I'm gonna hand it back to you, I think.
Just to say thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you, Kartikeya. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Apologies for our scheduling challenges, but as Kartikeya said, there'll be more opportunities in the future. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good day.